Justy. Welcome back to the Skeptheist, an ongoing series of videos in which I discuss aspects of science and philosophy. Who am I? Well, that's of course irrelevant for the purposes of today's discussion, but stick around till the end if you want to find out more about what I get up to. So today's episode 13, is of course about superstition. And it's been shown that superstition, the tendency to be superstitious, correlates very strongly with the perception of a lack of control. So you even see this in sports, even within the various roles within sport. So in the case of bat and ball sports, it's the person who launches the ball who has the control. To begin with, has more control. They are initiating the event. They decide when to do it and how it will go, and the batter is reacting to that. So it's quite natural that the batter will tend to be more superstitious than the launcher of the projectile, simply because of that control. And as I say, there is a correlation between the perception of a lack of control. I can't control this thing, therefore I'm going to be superstitious. Now it's not a therefore, of course, because that would imply more rationality than is there. But human beings have been traditionally and historically rather superstitious. We would like as skeptics to think that this tendency is on the decline, that as we know more and more about our world and have more control, that we will tend to be less and less superstitious. But I figure today, Friday the 13th, is the perfect day to make such an episode. I missed my last opportunity, and apologies for being away for so long, but it's called life and responsibilities. And so yeah, Friday the 13th, I mean 13, triskaidekaphobia, fear of the number 13. People have gone as far as to eliminate the 13th floor from apartments. You know, it just goes 12 and then 14. And as we evolve as a species and gain more control over ourselves and our environment, it's hoped, I suppose, that the superstitions will go away. You know, one thing I find really interesting is why a particular thing becomes superstitious, or for example a particular day, you know, Friday the 13th. Now there are historical reasons for that, of course, but in a sense they are irrelevant and arbitrary in that if you have a collection of things, like say you have 10 numbers that you consider, and one of them by historical accident becomes more loaded with superstition, it's a little bit like a snowball effect where that one element will gather more snow, as it were. It will gather more moss. It will gather more of a reputation for being the superstitious, or the thing to be afraid of. And once that happens, of course, it's an amplifying effect. All the other numbers or things, whatever you're choosing, fade into the background, and the one thing that's seen as superstitious or as evil or as something to be feared just gains that reputation, and like I say, it just snowballs out of control. So human beings are very, very good at determining patterns and discriminating between, you know, values, essentially between things that might be good and might be bad, and even if there's no reason to do so, they will do that as a rule. So I think it's very important to continually, as a skeptic would, continually assess the situation. In this case, it's a situation of, is this thing you know, lucky or unlucky? And since becoming a skeptic, I have actually tried to remove the word lucky from my vocabulary. I don't see a need for it, because it does imply some supernatural, superstitious-driven force. And as I say, I tend to think that those things just are not applicable. They're not relevant. They don't exist. It's a bit like the mind-body problem. You know, it's an invention that makes that has some explanatory power, but ultimately is of no real use, and when exposed to the most basic of scientific and skeptical analysis, disappears quite quickly. So the reason I think a lot of superstitions thrive and continue to exist is the old philosophical and skeptical chestnut, the notion of falsifiability. So recall that a hypothesis or a statement or a claim is unfalsifiable if it cannot be proven to be false. So it's a little bit like the specious reasoning. You might remember that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa asks Homer if he would like to buy an anti-tiger machine, I think it is, and she says, "We don't see any tigers around here, do you?" And he falls for it. It's a very similar thing with superstitions. So without any blind, falsifiable peer-reviewed or as I say, blind study as to what would happen if the superstitious behaviour was not performed, it's very difficult to say that it didn't have an effect. So, and of course people like to get into confirmation bias where they remember the positives and ignore the negatives. So if someone goes out to bat and they do their ritual and they swing and miss, they say, well, I'm having a bad day, it's me. If they do the ritual and they swing and hit, they attribute that to the ritual. And so it's obvious how these things survive. Superstitions by themselves, I don't think, are a very healthy or helpful thing. But as I say, they intersect the realm of culture, and a lot of art and rituals and behaviours come from that. You could argue that, like, for example, a tea ceremony is somewhat superstitious, but I see that more on the cultural side. Where it becomes a problem is where it does intersect with something that might be obsessive, like an obsessive-compulsive disorder. And let's face it, the attribution of control to the superstitious behaviour is a cop-out. It's a little bit like the removal of responsibility for one's own life and giving it to a theistic deity. It is ultimately throwing up one's hands and saying, I can't control this, so I'm not going to try. And I don't think that's a healthy thing. I don't think that's a positive thing for our species. So, happy Friday the 13th, and hopefully it won't be as long until the next episode. Bye for now.
I'm the Skeptheist, skeptical atheist. Skeptics have open mind, didn't you know? If you didn't know, maybe watch the show. It's called the Skeptheist. When you have an open mind, you can grow. If you say you're open minded, try to put some work behind a Skeptheist.
But hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and bye for now.
What are you doing?